The auction house was buzzing with anticipation. After 6 months of preparation, I was finally presenting my grandmother's antique collection at Whitmore and Associates in downtown Chicago. The pieces were exquisite: Victorian jewelry, Ming Dynasty porcelain, and a collection of rare books that had taken 3 generations to assemble. At 28, I was the youngest person to ever consign such a valuable estate to the prestigious auction house. My boyfriend Marcus had been incredibly supportive throughout the process. He'd helped me catalog everything, research provenance, and even drove the pieces to the auction house himself. We'd been together for 3 years, living together for the past 18 months in my grandmother's old brownstone. Marcus was perfect in so many ways. Charming, attentive, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and always insisted on taking care of the practical details so I could focus on my art restoration business. The night before the auction, Marcus suggested we celebrate quietly at home. He'd cook dinner, open a bottle of wine, and we could review the catalog one more time. I was touched by his thoughtfulness, especially since he'd been dealing with his own stress at work lately. I was in the bathroom touching up my makeup when I heard voices from the Kit Brown. Marcus was on the phone, and something in his tone made me pause. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and our old house had thin walls. "The auction's tomorrow," he was saying. "After that, it won't matter anymore." I froze. Who was he talking to? I know it's been a long game, but she trusts me completely now. The power of attorney documents are already signed. She thinks it's just for the auction proceeds. My hands started shaking. Power of attorney? I'd signed some paperwork about the auction, but Marcus had explained it was standard procedure for high-value consignments. "Once the money hits the account, I'll transfer it and disappear. She'll never know what happened until it's too late." The voice on the other end was muffled, but I could hear someone responding. "Of course I feel bad about it," Marcus continued. "But do you know how much this collection is worth? Conservative estimate is $800,000. That's enough to start over completely." I felt like I was going to be sick. 3 years of my life, my grandmother's precious collection, everything I'd inherited was about to be stolen by the man I'd planned to marry. She's so trusting, it's almost pathetic. Never questions anything I tell her about legal documents or financial procedures. Her grandmother left her everything, but she has no idea how to handle money. I quietly closed the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub, trying to process what I'd just heard. Marcus wasn't just planning to steal from me. He'd been planning this for months, maybe years. The supportive boyfriend act, the helpful gestures, the way he'd inserted himself into every aspect of the auction process, it had all been calculated. I needed to think fast. The auction was tomorrow morning. If Marcus had legal documents giving him access to the proceeds, I had to act tonight. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink, buying myself time to compose my face. When I emerged from the bathroom, Marcus was setting the table, looking as loving and attentive as always. "Everything okay, babe? You look a little pale." "Just nervous about tomorrow," I said, forcing a smile. "This is such a big deal." "Hey, don't worry about it. I've handled all the paperwork. You just need to show up and watch your grandmother's treasures find new homes." The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. These weren't just valuable objects to me. They were family history, memories, the only connection I had left to my grandmother who'd raised me after my parents died. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed," I said. "Would it be okay if I took a walk, clear my head before dinner?" Marcus looked concerned. "Of course, want me to come with you?" "No, I need some alone time. I'll be back in an hour." I grabbed my purse and phone and walked out into the Chicago evening. As soon as I was around the corner, I called my friend Sarah, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. "Sarah, I need help. It's an emergency." "What's wrong?" I explained what I'd overheard, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah listened without interrupting, then said, "You need to get to the auction house tonight. If he has fraudulent power of attorney documents, you need to revoke them immediately. Do you have copies of what you signed?" "They're in my desk at home." "Get them, and whatever you do, don't let him know you suspect anything. If he's planned this for years, he might have contingencies." I walked back to the house, my mind racing. Marcus was in the Kit Brown, humming while he cooked. The domestic scene that had once felt comforting now felt like a performance. "How was your walk?" "Good, I'm feeling better." I kissed his cheek, hating myself for the deception but knowing I had to play along. "I'm going to grab something from my office upstairs. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I went to my desk and found the folder with the auction paperwork. As I read through the documents Marcus had given me to sign, my blood ran cold. Hidden among the standard consignment agreements was indeed a power of attorney form, but it was much broader than he'd explained. It gave him complete control over my finances, not just the auction proceeds. I photographed every page with my phone and texted them to Sarah. Her response came back within minutes. This is fraud. The language is deliberately misleading. We need to file an emergency injunction tonight. Can we do that? My boss owes me a favor. I'm calling him now. I heard Marcus calling me for dinner. I put the papers back exactly as I'd found them and went downstairs, my stomach churning with anxiety and betrayal. Marcus had made my favorite meal, roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans. He'd even lit candles and opened a bottle of expensive wine. Under different circumstances, it would have been perfect. To your grandmother's legacy, he said, raising his glass, and to new beginnings. I clinked my glass against his, wondering if he could see the hatred in my eyes. To new beginnings. We ate in relative silence. Marcus seemed relaxed, probably thinking his plan was proceeding smoothly. I pushed food around my plate, too nervous to eat much. You seem quiet tonight, he said. Still worried about tomorrow? Just processing everything. It's hard to let go of her things, you know. I understand, but think of it this way. Your grandmother would want her collection to be appreciated by people who understand its value. And the money will give you freedom to pursue your art restoration work without worrying about finances. The irony was sickening. He was comforting me about losing my inheritance while planning to steal it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Meet me at the auction house at 9 p.m. We have an emergency hearing at 10. I excused myself to the bathroom and texted back. What should I do about Marcus? Nothing. Act normal. Don't give him any reason to suspect. When I returned to the table, Marcus was looking at his own phone. Work emergency, he said. I need to make a quick call. He stepped out onto the back porch, closing the door behind him. I could see him through the window, pacing as he talked. His body language was tense, aggressive. This wasn't the Marcus I thought I knew. After dinner, I helped him clean up, playing the role of the loving girlfriend one last time. At 8:30, I said I was exhausted and wanted to go to bed early. Good idea, Marcus said. Big day tomorrow. I'll be up in a few minutes. I went upstairs and waited until I heard him in the shower. Then I grabbed my car keys and slipped out through the front door. The auction house was dark except for security lights. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot with an older man in a rumpled suit. This is my boss, David Brown, she said. He's agreed to help us file an emergency injunction. David looked skeptical. This is highly irregular. Are you certain about what you heard? I played the recording I'd made on my phone during Marcus's call. I'd managed to capture most of the conversation by leaving my phone on the Kit Brown counter when I went to the bathroom. David's expression changed as he listened. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. We need to contact the police as well as the court. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and emergency filings. By midnight, we had a temporary restraining order preventing Marcus from accessing any of the auction proceeds and a court date scheduled for the following week. What happens now? I asked. You go home and act like nothing happened, David said. Don't confront him. Let him think his plan is working. We need him to attempt the fraud so we can prove criminal intent. I drove home at 1 in the morning, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Marcus was asleep when I slipped back into bed. He stirred as I got under the covers. Where were you? He mumbled. Couldn't sleep. Went downstairs for some tea. He pulled me close, and I had to fight not to recoil from his touch. Everything's going to be perfect tomorrow, he whispered into my hair. The auction was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. I arrived early, ostensibly to check on the display, but really to coordinate with the auction house staff. They'd been briefed by David and knew to stall any financial transactions until after the court hearing. Marcus arrived looking confident and well-dressed. He kissed me and said, ready to make some money. The auction proceeded normally. My grandmother's pieces sold well, some for more than the estimated values. Marcus kept checking his phone, probably monitoring the bank account where he expected the proceeds to be deposited. During the lunch break, he pulled me aside. I need to take care of some paperwork with the auction house. Financial stuff. You don't need to worry about it. Actually, I'd like to be involved. It's my inheritance. For just a moment, his mask slipped. I saw irritation, maybe even anger, flash across his face. Then he smiled. Of course, I just thought you'd find it boring. We went to the auction house's business office together. Marcus presented his power of attorney documents to the financial manager, who examined them carefully. I'm sorry, the manager said, but we've received instructions to hold all proceeds pending legal review. There seems to be some question about the validity of these documents. Marcus's face went white. What kind of question? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. You'll need to speak with your attorney. Marcus turned to me, and I saw the exact moment he realized I knew. His expression shifted from confusion to calculation to barely controlled rage. We need to talk. he said quietly. We walked out of the auction house in silence. Once we were in the parking lot, Marcus grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "What did you do?" "I protected myself from a thief. You don't understand. I've been planning this for years. I gave up everything for you. You gave up everything to rob me." "I love you," he said, and for a moment he sounded like the Marcus I'd fallen for. "I didn't want to hurt you. The plan was to disappear and start over somewhere else. You would have been better off without me anyway. Better off without someone who's been lying to me for 3 years. I never lied about my feelings. Everything else was just practical." The police arrived then, summoned by the auction house when Marcus had tried to access the funds. They arrested him on charges of attempted fraud and conspiracy. As they put him in handcuffs, he looked at me with something that might have been genuine remorse. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really did love you." I watched them drive away, feeling empty rather than vindicated. 3 years of my life had been built on a lie. The man I'd planned to marry had been planning to rob me blind, but Marcus's arrest was just the beginning. Within days, I discovered the true scope of his deception. The police investigation revealed that Marcus Williams wasn't even his real name. He was actually Michael Warren, a career con artist with warrants in 4 states. Detective Rodriguez, who was handling the case, called me in for an interview a week after the arrest. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes. "We've been tracking Mr. Warren for 3 years, she told me. He's suspected in at least a dozen similar cases across the Midwest. You're the first victim who caught him before he could complete the theft." She showed me a thick file filled with police reports, victim statements, and surveillance photos. Marcus looked different in some of them, different hair color, sometimes a beard, once even wearing glasses he didn't need. "His method is always the same," Detective Rodriguez explained. "He targets women who have recently inherited valuable assets. He builds long-term relationships, gains their trust, inserts himself into their financial affairs, and then disappears with their money." The photos of his other victims were heartbreaking. Women of all ages, all backgrounds, all with the same look of betrayal and devastation I recognized from my own mirror. "How long has he been doing this?" "We think about 15 years. Started small with short-term cons, but he got smarter, more patient. The long-term relationship scam is much more profitable." She handed me a list of names. "These are his confirmed victims. We'd like you to consider reaching out to them. Many of them have never spoken to anyone else who went through the same experience." That evening, I called the first name on the list, Jennifer Martinez from Denver. She answered on the 3rd ring, and when I explained who I was, she started crying. "I thought I was going crazy," she said. "Everyone kept telling me I should have seen the signs, that I was naive for trusting him. But you understand, don't you, how convincing he was?" Jennifer's story was eerily similar to mine. Marcus, who had called himself Mark Williams when he was with her, had courted her for 2 years after her father's death. He'd helped her deal with the estate, including a valuable collection of Western art. One day, he'd simply vanished, along with $400,000 from her father's collection. "The worst part wasn't the money," she said. "It was feeling like such a fool, like I'd been living with a stranger who was just pretending to love me." Over the next few weeks, I spoke with 5 more of Marcus's victims. Each conversation was both heartbreaking and healing. We'd all experienced the same manipulation, the same careful grooming, the same devastating betrayal. Sarah Brown from Portland had lost her mother's jewelry collection. Lisa Rodriguez from Kansas City had been robbed of her grandmother's antique furniture. Maria Santos from Milwaukee had lost both money and property to Marcus's schemes. "He told me he wanted to marry me," Maria said during one of our group video calls. "Said we'd use my inheritance to buy a house together. I actually started planning our wedding while he was planning to rob me." We decided to form a support group, meeting virtually once a week. It helped to talk to people who truly understood the unique trauma of being deceived by someone you loved and trusted completely. But Marcus's network was larger than any of us had realized. During the investigation, Detective Rodriguez discovered that he hadn't been working alone. His work calls that I'd witnessed were actually conversations with an accomplice named Tony Brennan, who specialized in creating fraudulent legal documents. Brennan was arrested 2 weeks after Marcus, caught trying to use fake power of attorney papers to access another victim's bank account in Indianapolis. His apartment was filled with sophisticated document creation equipment, high-end printers, embossing tools, official-looking letterhead from law firms that didn't exist. "They had a whole system," Detective Rodriguez explained. "Warren would identify and groom the victims, Brennan would create the legal paperwork, and they'd split the proceeds. We estimate they stole over $2 million in the past 5 years alone." The investigation also revealed that Marcus had been researching me long before we'd accidentally met at that coffee shop 3 years ago. He'd found my grandmother's obituary, which mentioned her valuable antique collection, and had spent weeks learning my routine before orchestrating our first encounter. "He knew your favorite coffee order before you told him," Detective Rodriguez said, showing me surveillance footage from the coffee shop. "He'd been watching you for 2 weeks, taking notes on your habits." The premeditation was chilling. Every moment of our relationship, every gesture of love or support, had been calculated to serve his ultimate goal of stealing my inheritance. The legal proceedings became even more complex when additional victims came forward. The FBI took over the case because Marcus and Brennan had operated across state lines. Federal charges included wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Marcus's defense attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. They wanted to make an example of him to deter other long-term romance scammers. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days, describing how Marcus had inserted himself into my life and financial affairs. The hardest part was admitting in open court how completely I'd trusted him, how I'd signed documents without reading them carefully because I believed he had my best interests at heart. "The defendant exploited the most basic human need for love and connection," the prosecutor said in her closing argument. "He turned trust into a weapon, love into a tool for theft. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was a calculated, systematic exploitation of vulnerable people." Marcus's attorney tried to paint him as a man driven by difficult circumstances, someone who'd made bad choices but wasn't inherently evil. But the evidence was overwhelming. Years of planning, multiple false identities, sophisticated document forgery, and a complete lack of remorse. The jury convicted both Marcus and Brennan on all charges. Marcus was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Brennan received 12 years. Neither would be eligible for parole for at least 10 years. At the sentencing hearing, several victims gave impact statements. Jennifer spoke about the years of therapy she'd needed to trust anyone again. Sarah described how the theft had forced her to sell her childhood home. Maria talked about the financial devastation that had nearly cost her custody of her children. When it was my turn, I looked directly at Marcus. "You didn't just steal money from us," I said. "You stole our ability to trust, to love freely, to believe that someone could care about us without ulterior motives. You turned our best qualities, our capacity for love and trust, into vulnerabilities to be exploited." Marcus looked at me as I spoke, and I thought I saw genuine shame in his eyes. When given the chance to address the court, he said, "I know I can't undo what I've done. I know sorry isn't enough. I want everyone to know that my feelings for these women were real, even if everything else was a lie. That doesn't excuse anything, but it's the truth." The judge wasn't impressed. "Mr. Warren, you've shown a pattern of predatory behavior spanning over a decade. You've caused immeasurable financial and emotional harm to multiple victims. The court sees this as calculated exploitation, not misguided affection." After the sentencing, the group of victims stayed in touch. We'd been through something together that few people could understand. Jennifer started a nonprofit organization to help other victims of romance scams. Sarah became an advocate for stronger consumer protection laws. Maria went back to school to study criminal justice. I decided to use my experience differently. I partnered with the FBI to create educational materials about long-term romance scams. We developed presentations for community groups, especially targeting people who'd recently lost spouses or inherited valuable assets. "These predators are sophisticated," I would tell audiences. "They don't look like criminals. They're charming, patient, and they tell you exactly what you want to hear. The best defense is knowledge and healthy skepticism." The recovery process was long and difficult. I had to rebuild not just my finances, but my entire sense of self. How had I been so blind? How had I missed so many red flags? The self-doubt was almost as damaging as the financial loss. Therapy helped, especially group sessions with other fraud victims. We learned that self-blame was part of the trauma, that intelligent, successful people fall for these scams precisely because the perpetrators are skilled manipulators. "You weren't stupid," my therapist, Dr. Williams, told me repeatedly. "You were targeted by someone whose full-time job was deceiving you. He spent 3 years studying your psychology, your vulnerabilities, your triggers. You never had a fair chance." The civil litigation took 2 more years. We sued Marcus, Brennan, and several banks that had failed to flag suspicious transactions. The settlement was substantial enough to compensate most victims for their losses, though no amount of money could repair the emotional damage. I used my portion of the settlement to expand my art restoration business and to fund the nonprofit work. I also established a scholarship fund for students studying art history and preservation, named after my grandmother. 3 years after Marcus's conviction, I met someone new. David was a museum curator who understood the value of preserving history and heritage. When I told him about Marcus, he said, "Thank you for trusting me with that story. I promise to earn that trust every day." Our relationship developed slowly. David was patient with my trust issues, never pushed for more access to my life or finances than I was ready to give. He encouraged me to maintain my independence and even suggested I get a second opinion on any major financial decisions, even ones that didn't involve him. "I want you to feel safe with me," he said. "That means you should never feel pressured to trust me blindly." Marcus writes me letters from prison. I don't read them, but I don't throw them away either. My therapist says I might want to read them someday when I'm ready to forgive him for my own peace of mind rather than his. The support group still meets monthly. We've helped identify 3 other con artists using similar tactics, and our advocacy work has led to stronger protections for inheritance fraud victims. We call ourselves the Heritage Protection Network, and we've consulted on over 50 cases. "We can't get back what we lost," Jennifer said at our last meeting, "but we can make sure fewer people lose what we did." My grandmother's collection, which started this whole ordeal, eventually found good homes. The jewelry went to collectors who promised to preserve it. The porcelain went to a museum where it's part of a permanent exhibition on Chinese art. The books went to a university library where they're available to researchers forever. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that phone call. Marcus would have stolen everything, disappeared, and I would have spent years wondering what I'd done wrong. I would have blamed myself for his abandonment, never knowing I'd been the victim of a carefully planned crime. But I did hear the call. I did act. And while I lost 3 years of my life to a lie, I gained something too. The knowledge that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can protect myself and others, that love shouldn't require blind trust. Marcus is eligible for parole in 12 years. When that time comes, I'll be ready. Not because I'm afraid of him, but because I want to make sure he doesn't get the chance to hurt anyone else the way he hurt us. The inheritance my grandmother left me wasn't just money and objects. It was the strength to fight for what's right, the wisdom to recognize deception, and the determination to help others avoid the pain I experienced. That's a legacy worth preserving, and one that no con artist can ever steal.